The Otherworldly Neighbor. When the Wilson family moved to sunny Los Angeles, they thought it was the start of a new chapter. Sam and Laura, a young couple with two children, 8-year-old Ellie and 5-year-old Zach, had purchased a cozy suburban house. It was spacious, with a beautiful garden and large windows. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood where the neighbors smiled and greeted each other. Everything seemed perfect until he appeared. Meeting Mr. Grace. A few days after moving in, Laura noticed their neighbor across the street watching them from his window. He was an elderly man with a gaunt face, deep wrinkles and piercing eyes. His intense gaze made Laura feel uneasy, but she brushed it off as ordinary curiosity. Later, he approached Sam while he was trimming the hedges outside. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said in a raspy voice. "I'm Mr. Grace. I've lived here for 30 years. If you need anything, just ask." His smile was strained and his handshake was icy. When he left, Sam exhaled with slight relief. Something about the man unsettled him. The oddities begin. During their first week, the neighbors mostly kept to themselves, except for Mr. Grace. He was constantly nearby, standing on his porch, walking slowly down the street, or just watching their house from his window. Laura began noticing peculiar things. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., Mr. Grace would step onto his porch, take out an antique pocket watch, and stare at its face as if waiting for something. He never got in his car, yet it was always immaculately clean. Even Ellie and Zach started mentioning strange things. "Mom, Mr. Grace said he has kids too," Ellie said during dinner one night. "He said they used to play on our lawn." "What kids?" Sam frowned. "He's way too old to have little kids." Laura didn't know how to respond, but a sense of unease stirred within her. Uninvited visitors. One night, Laura woke to a strange noise. It sounded like a faint tapping, as if someone was lightly knocking on the window. She cautiously approached the bedroom window and looked outside. Mr. Grace was standing on their lawn, staring directly at her with that same strange smile. Sam went downstairs to confront him, but by the time he stepped onto the porch, Mr. Grace was gone. Only a patch of flattened grass remained where he had stood, as though he'd been there for some time. The next day, the family decided to install security cameras. Unveiling secrets. The cameras began capturing strange events. At night, someone would walk through their yard. The visitor's face was always blurry, as if the camera couldn't focus on it. On one recording, however, they clearly saw Mr. Grace's figure. Determined to find out more, Sam started asking around about the neighbors. What he learned sent chills down his spine. "Grace?" an old mailman repeated when Sam showed him the footage. "That man died 10 years ago. They found him in his house and no one knows how it happened." Sam felt a cold shiver run down his back. The other side. The family was now on edge. One night, the cameras recorded something horrifying. The doors of their house opened on their own, and Mr. Grace stepped inside. On the footage, his movements were jerky and unnatural. Laura heard footsteps in the hallway. She locked herself in the bedroom with the children while Sam searched the house with a baseball bat. But he found no one. They called the police, but the officers just shrugged, saying there was no sign of a break-in. A journey into the past. Laura began researching their house. At the city archives, she discovered shocking details. The Wilsons' home had been built on the site of an old school that burned down many years ago. Dozens of children had died in the fire, and Mr. Grace, as it turned out, had been the school's principal. He had lived out his life consumed by guilt over their deaths. The final encounter. One night, the children disappeared. Laura and Sam frantically searched the house. They heard voices coming from the attic. When they climbed up, they found the children standing in a circle around Mr. Grace. "I just wanted to protect them," he whispered. His body began to fade, turning into smoke. Around him, ghostly figures of children appeared. "You need to leave before it's too late," they murmured before vanishing along with Mr. Grace, leaving the house. The next day, the family packed their belongings and left. As they drove away, Laura glanced back and saw Mr. Grace's silhouette in the window of their former home. Los Angeles, like life itself, moved on, but the Wilsons never returned to the neighborhood. The house remained vacant, and the neighbors no longer saw Mr. Grace, Yet some claimed that on quiet nights they could still hear the laughter of children coming from the house on the corner. The otherworldly neighbor. The Wilsons thought their ordeal had ended when they left the house. But it turned out that the story of Mr. Grace and the children who perished in the fire would not let them go so easily. A new home, an old shadow. The family moved to another neighborhood in Los Angeles. The new house was smaller and simpler, but much cozier. Most importantly, it seemed ordinary. However, within a few days, strange things began to happen again. One evening, as Laura was tucking the children into bed, Zach whispered, "Mom, I saw Mr. Grace. He was standing by the window." Laura felt a chill run through her body. "It's just a bad dream, sweetheart. He can't be here," she tried to reassure her son. But that night, she herself heard the familiar sound, a faint tapping on the glass. She went to the bedroom window and looked out, but saw nothing except the flickering street lamp. Signals from the past. Sam, convinced that the family's fears were caused by stress, decided to destroy the last reminders of their old home. He gathered old records and printouts from the archives that Laura had brought with her and burned them in the yard. "It's all behind us now," he said confidently. But that night, the fireplace in the living room lit itself. The flames burned with an eerie green glow, and in them, Laura saw the outlines of faces. Among them was the familiar gaunt face of Mr. Grace. She panicked and woke Sam. "It's him! We can't escape him!" Ghostly children. Ellie, the eldest daughter, began having strange dreams. She dreamed of children dressed in old-fashioned school uniforms who called her to play. In these dreams, they always stood near an old building, with flames bursting from its windows. "They want me to come to them," Ellie confessed to her parents. Laura was alarmed, but didn't know how to help her daughter. Later that evening, Laura found one of Ellie's drawings. It depicted an old house, an exact copy of their first home, surrounded by children's silhouettes. But what frightened her the most were the words scrawled on the drawing. On each sheet, written in a childlike hand, were the words, "Come back." The inevitable return. Realizing that they couldn't escape Mr. Grace or his curse, Laura decided to take action. She contacted a medium named Martha, known for her ability to banish spirits. "You must return to the house," Martha said after conducting a ritual with the family's belongings. "Mr. Grace's soul is tied to that place. Until you confront his past, he won't let you go." Sam was against the idea, but Laura convinced him that it was the only way to protect their children. Back to the house. They returned to the old house at night. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Laura felt the air grow heavy and the silence become deafening. Together with Martha, they began a cleansing ritual. Martha lit candles and started reciting prayers, but soon her voice turned into a panicked scream. Suddenly, Mr. Grace's figure appeared in the room. He stared at the family, but his gaze was filled not with anger, but with pain. "I didn't want them to die," he whispered. "I just wanted to protect them." Laura took a step forward. "Why are you haunting us?" "They call to me. I must stay here to care for them." Reconciliation. Laura remembered what she had learned about Mr. Grace. He wasn't an evil man, but a broken one, consumed by guilt over the children's deaths. She stepped closer to his ghost and said, "You can't go on like this, existing, not living. You deserve peace, and these children deserve a chance to move on to a better place." The figures of the children began to appear around Mr. Grace. Their faces were no longer angry, only sad. "We forgive you, Mr. Grace," a child's voice echoed. Liberation. The house filled with a bright light, and one by one, the ghosts of the children began to disappear. Mr. Grace was the last to fade, his face finally at peace.